Hey, hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 166th Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our televised discussions twice monthly to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded political dialogue. Today, our panel will discuss the rapidly changing and historically contentious process by which we elect the President of the United States. Today's panel opens with Joe Gaines, former member of the faculty of the University of Akron, followed by Bryan Laubaugh, president of R&D Financial Services, Dr. Ronald Chamberlin, retired senior research chemist, and Patty Haskins, member of the Wadsworth City Council. Joe, feelings on both sides of the political fence are running stronger than in any other time in my memory. I have a real concern over what our country is going to look like when it's all over. What are your thoughts?
Well, I agree with you. I think we do have a lot of concern of what it's going to look like after this election is over. I have no idea what this election is going to bring about. I don't mean who's going to win or lose. I mean, will the person who wins or the person who loses, will he give up the administration if he loses? Will there be a battle? Will there be arguments? Will there be fights? When I think about it, I often wonder, has anything really changed politically in our country over the years? It seems like it has, but then again, it doesn't. I mean, we are not really known to read, to find out information about the issues. We're more interested in the candidates and the candidates themselves as people. We look at candidates almost like how we did when we voted for a homecoming king or queen in high school. We don't vote for what their views are. We don't vote for the issues. We vote for basically, we like the guy, we don't like the guy. I mean, I've heard some things, you know, I want to really like Trump. I really want to like his issues, but I don't know what his issues are in many cases. And I don't like him because in many cases, the way he treats other people and his how he comes across. You think the debates would help out, but they don't. The debate, if anything, ruins it in many cases. Shows childlike behavior, shows miscommunication, shows all kinds of negative aspects. But the debate should, if anything, bring out what the issues are and the views of the candidate on those issues. We've become Democrat and Republican people, not Americans. We're either Democrat or Republican. It seems that's what we want to be. We don't want to be Americans anymore. And that bothers me a great deal. We argue the candidates, but not the issues. And I think that's the biggest problem. And I don't think that's going to change. I think if anything, it's going to be the same, if not worse. What do you think?
Bryan, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think that with the amplification of social media, it makes things seem worse than it really is.
Yeah.
When you go and look at history and some of the things that were written in different presidential elections, there were some pretty scurrilous things written about candidates, from being an adulterer to a pedophile to, you know, just unbelievable things. If you just take a look at the newspapers back then in the 1800s and in the early 1900s, you'll find that they were muckrakers. They were doing everything they possibly could to tar and feather each other. But with social media and the 24-hour news cycle, it almost makes it unbearable to listen every day as whatever the whatever the daily issue is, whether it's, you know, someone had 2 scoops of ice cream or what flavor milkshake you got, you know, it just gets to be a little much, and it wears on people. And I would agree. I'd love to have a debate on issues, but where we're at now politically, it's very tribal. And, you know, I like Patty Haskins. I like Joe. I like Ron. I like these people. When Senator Feinstein gets dragged through the press and social media because she hugged Lindsey Graham, or when Lindsey Graham on the other side, puts out a little olive leaf on an issue and he gets dragged. So that just tells me that, we're at a point where we really have to step back. And as Joe said, we're Americans. I don't consider myself a German American, an Italian American. I'm an American. And this ability for outside forces to divide us and make us into different tribes as far as, Asian Americans, Black Americans, Latino, Latinx, whatever the division or whatever the moniker they want to tag you with, I don't think that helps at all, especially in this particular process. Presidential elections have always been rancorous. I mean, I've lived through enough of them. It's not going to get any better until all the parties step back and say, listen, do we need to put the country through, and this has been going on for a year and a half. I mean, they started the presidential elections almost 2 years ago. So there are things that we can do to probably make things better. But this notion that somehow we're separated in tribes and, you can't cross the aisle. I remember when Jim Renacci was in Congress. He tried, there was another congressman, they put together this little lunch or breakfast club, and they basically said, you can't do that, and that's sad. It really is sad that we can't have any sort of compromise and move towards the middle without being, labeled, a traitor or labeled, whatever label they want to throw out there on social media. So, I just think we just did the grin and bear it, and whatever it is, whatever the election, the outcome is, as Americans, we accept that and we move forward, and we believe in the process that the founders set up.
Where do you think the media fits into all this?
I think the media is the worst offender of them all. You can go through and look at just what's happened just over the last 6-8 months. I don't believe we have any real third, I guess, that third rail that is supposed to keep government honest. I really struggle with that when it comes to some of the reports that come out and the bias that they've seen. If you're not on social media, you probably would think, oh, they're just doing their job. But the bias is crazy, and it's on both sides. I can't argue for Fox. I can't argue for CNN, MSNBC. Some of these things are just, it's nuts. So I really struggle when we don't have a press that actually will hold both sides feet to the fire.
But don't you think we allow that to happen?
I'm going to circle back to you, Brian, and ask you in a few minutes if you think there's a solution to that media bias problem. But in the meantime, Ron, what are your thoughts?
I've been thinking along several lines in the last week since we considered this subject, but before that too. And I have some grave fears, I think, about what sort of social unrest there might be. I read a report recently that in Erie County, Pennsylvania, the KKK has been going around dropping off pamphlets at homes with Biden signs in the front yard. And they are claiming that they're going to show up polling places armed. And the local government says they don't have enough deputies to police all this, to keep people from being intimidated. So that's a possibility. Trump is saying he may not pass along the process of passing of power, but I think that might just be Trump being his usual contentious self to kind of yank our chain. Can't be that stupid he doesn't realize that we've got constitutional things going on here. But I can see that there could be lawsuits. They can be problems. Individually, it could be a great problem. There has been voter suppression going on. For example, Texas and Ohio both one ballot box per per county, and in Texas they have counties that are the size of Connecticut. It's ridiculous. Might be a little too soon now to do it. There are places where there are robocalls going on where people are saying, well, we're going to turn you into the bill collector unless you vote our way. That kind of thing is going on. Michigan has been having problems. After all, people showed up and tried to kidnap the governor, and Trump didn't really put them down. And so things like that going on. On the opposite side, I have seen, just this morning in the Akron Beacon Journal, it was reported from some other thing, but there's a report of a study that was done about how divided are we? And the conclusion was we're not nearly as divided as the media says we are. Gave as one example, people's opinion on increasing the minimum wage. And the percentage of approval for that has gone up considerably, and mostly it was because Republican approval has increased dramatically over the last year or so. So there are some situations where these studies, there were several think tanks that put this together. I've never heard of any of them, but still, they concluded that we're not really quite as divided as we think we are. So maybe Joe, there's hope. Maybe we're not going to have a civil war going on here afterwards. I would certainly hope not. I don't see any problem here in Wadsworth for sure, but it's difficult. Fox News has reported that Republicans in general are just hunkering down. They don't report much on Democrats except negatively, but becoming more, as the process wears on, that folks on one side or the other are becoming more committed to their position. I've already voted. And for one of the first times in my life, I did not vote for any Republicans. I almost always do, locally or statewide. It's just that I am so disgusted with the Republican Party on the national level over the last 3 years that I just couldn't do it. Where there are situations where a candidate had nobody opposing to him on a county level, I just didn't vote for that candidate. It was an emotional reaction, but it was real. But I think there's hope. I'm worried, but I think there's hope. So,
Patty, are you keeping your emotions in check? Can't hear you, Patty. Unmute, Patty.
You're on mute.
This whole election process that we're going through right now is quite interesting. It's quite different, partially due to COVID and the way that people are voting. And I think people are concerned about how reliable the election results will be and whether our vote will be counted or not. I've worked at the polls for over 10 years. I've had quite a bit to deal with the County Board of Elections. And I'd like to say that at least here in Medina County, I think we have an excellent system. The people at the Board of Elections do not see RRD. They actually help anybody, are concerned more that people are able to vote conveniently, and they aren't concerned about what your party is. And that's really a nice thing to see. This election is different because so many more people are using mail-in ballots, either actually mailing them in or driving them, as was alluded to before by Ron, to a drop box, which we have. The only one is at the county office. The other thing that I've seen is an increase in-person early voting, which is actually what I did. And you have to go to the Board of Elections. I will warn you, if you're doing that, you're going to be waiting outside, not inside, to vote. So if it's cold, make sure you bring a coat. I do have some suggestions, though, for voters, because I think only by voting can we help to heal the divide that's within the country and help to provide reliance upon the election. Number one, I think that we need to have informed voters. when you go to the poll, you should know what's going to be on that ballot before you get there. And that's easy to do. If you go to Medina County Board of Elections on your computer, you can print out an entire sample ballot. So you know exactly what issues, what people are going to be on there. Make sure that you are aware of the candidates, not just the president, but all of the down ballot candidates. And there's a lot of them this year. We have Supreme Court justices for the state of Ohio. We have Court of Common Pleas judges that we are voting on. We are voting on county commissioners, county recorders, state board of education, county prosecutor, state representatives. All of these are important issues. One of the best ways I think that you could, at least in Wadsworth, we're very fortunate that you can find out about these candidates is go to the Wadsworth Public Library and you can visit their candidate forum, which they held about a month ago. And this was an excellent forum run by their director, Daniel Sliff, in which, and they did it virtually, but it's probably the best one they've ever done because they had such a high participation level. For example, the candidates for state Supreme Court were involved. It runs over 2 hours. You get an opening statement from all of the candidates that are on the ballot. They are asked questions which were previously submitted, and they had quite a few of them and were very topical. And then they got to give a closing statement. This way you have an idea to listen to both sides of the aisle, what their opinions are, what they stand for. And unfortunately, too many people go to the ballot box and don't know who these people even are, leastways who they're going to vote for. Another thing you can do is you can take a cheat sheet with you to the polls. You are entitled to actually carry a list of the candidates that you wish to vote for into the polling place. And it makes for an easier, quicker way to vote, particularly for those people that plan to vote on November 3rd. If there's long lines, there's nothing better to prevent long lines or to make them move faster than people that know who they're going to vote for and can do so quickly. One of the concerns I have is the recent calls to, though, have observers, people watching the polls. Observers have long been a standing reality here in the state of Ohio, but there's rules for that. You cannot just walk into a polling place on November 3rd and decide that you're going to be an observer. You have to be appointed by the County Board of Elections. And the only way you can be appointed is if you are, there's 3 groups that can nominate you. It can be a group of 5 candidates who are on the ballot. You could be nominated by a political party that has candidates on the ballot, or you can be nominated by a group which has an issue on the ballot. That is submitted to the Board of Elections. The Board of Elections then contacts you. They take you through training, take you through all the things you can and can't do. For example, you can't go up and harass poll workers. You cannot go to voters and say, how did you vote within the place? You're there simply to observe. My concern is that people are just going to show up because that's been asked and say, gee, I'm going to observe what's going on and watch for fraud. And they will be actually removed from the polling place if they do that. So those are just some of my thoughts on the election.
I have a question about polling places. With the Supreme Court overruling Section 5C of the Civil Rights Act of 1965.
Oh, okay.
Immediately following the 9 states who had been subjected to C5, where they would have to appeal to the government to make any changes.
Cut way back.
There were hundreds of polling places that were shut down, and mainly, or at least predominantly, in black areas. In fact, Louisville, Kentucky, while they weren't one of the 9 states, it had the largest black population in Jefferson County, which is the same county as Louisville. And they had 237, I believe, polling places, and they closed all but 2 or maybe even 1. And that people had to wait in line to vote by up to 7 hours. The average, I believe, in the last election in that county was 4 hours of waiting time to vote. My
Right.
question is, with mail-in voting, particularly every single state in the union has absentee voting. Why would anyone wait in line 7 hours when they can do an absentee vote from their home?
You know, I think that's why some states have gone to all mail-in. I think Oregon, Washington, there's 5 states that do, that's the only way you can vote. You know, and even, you know, when they've cut back, they've made it like 8 hours that people are waiting. I agree with you, John. Vote early. Now, when I voted early at the Board of Elections, I still waited in line an hour and 20 minutes. So there might be a wait. I don't know why some people will not do that.
I voted in Wadsworth for 50 years. I don't think I ever waited more than 10 minutes.
The longest I ever saw anybody wait was 30 minutes.
I went yesterday and voted at the Board of Elections, and it was probably about a 25-minute wait. It seemed to me, just observing, that they didn't have all their stations opened. You know, like when you go in, there are stations that check your ID and issue you the ballot. There were machines that were open. I mean, I was in an aisle that there was a machine, you know, they don't put you, you know, next to somebody, but not all the machines that were open were actually being used. But I don't know, you know, what the overall process or what they're dealing with. But I just want to reiterate what Patty said, that in Medina County, I have faith in the Board of Elections in all the states. I really don't want the federal government tampering with the local Board of Elections. You know, the Board of Elections has what? They have equal representation of the parties.
Right.
They come up with the rules. Everybody agrees to what those rules are. And what we've seen are some of these lawsuits that have been challenging the rules that local boards of election have agreed to, like the signature verification. Our Rotary Club had a nice program by the office of Frank LaRose. One of his assistants said that, you know, this has been in place for many years. We have the capacity to verify signatures. It doesn't add that much time to it. And it adds a level of validation that the person requesting the ballot is actually that person. I'm all for absentee ballot. I'm not for universal mail-in ballot where they just, like California, send out to every registered voter an actual ballot. You know, I don't think that's the way to handle it.
There are actually 12 states that do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for some, again, that's the only way they can vote.
Yeah, but then you get all wrapped up in when a local board of election or a state goes in and starts scrubbing their, you know, they have a process and they say this person hasn't voted in 5 years. We've sent a postcard to this address for the last, you know, 3 years. They're not here. Let's take them off the rolls. And all of a sudden there's this hue and cry that somehow they're suppressing the vote of people that don't live in the state anymore. So I want to reiterate that what Patty's been saying is correct. I have no doubt whatsoever in the local board of election having a free and fair election. And if you think standing in line 25 minutes is suppressing your vote, then you need to go over to what is Iraq, when those people were taking their lives in their hands and getting their little purple finger because they were standing in line to vote. And that's how important it is. And I'm more than willing to stand in line a half hour, an hour, you know, to cast my vote in person or to send in an absentee ballot.
Joe, a while ago when Bryan was talking, I interrupted you.
Well, I was just going to say, I mailed my vote in, and I felt a little weird in doing it. And I agree with Bryan. I'd rather go and vote. If I could do it again, I'd rather go be there personally. But we made an issue that we keep talking about, you know, like the problems of voting. What have the problems been in the past? Has there been that major problems? No, not that I know of. But we make an issue out of it to get people to do what the government wants them to do. This election frightens me in some ways. The election itself, not just the candidates, but the election itself, how it's being handled.
I agree. I
Good.
think it's a scary proposition right now.
Right.
I'm not looking forward to November the 4th.
No, and that's strange because neither am I. Even if a candidate wins. But I agree with Patty. I mean, you can look, I get the Beacon and I find out all the candidates are what they're running for, you know, what part, not just what party they are, but what's the issues. And you can read that and get good information. That's what you need. We don't do that anymore. We would rather have somebody tell us who to vote for than for us to figure out on our own.
I remember back when Kennedy was elected, there was ample information that the state of Illinois had cheated mightily in order to get Kennedy elected. When that was brought out the next day, Richard Nixon said, I am not going to call for a recount. We're not going to have that kind of a response to an election this time.
Both campaigns have started to set up their legal teams to contest the election if necessary. So that's concerning. By the way,
You know what they say in Chicago? Vote early and often.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to mention that I didn't mention before, for those people that do not want to vote by mail, but want to vote in person, but have physical disabilities, they cannot wait in line. There is such a thing called curbside voting, whereas you can stay in your car, someone can go in the building, let the poll workers know that there is a curbside voter outside, and they will accommodate you. So,
But you can sit in your home and you can request a ballot, an absentee ballot. You get it in the mail, you fill it out, you stick it in your mailbox the mailman picks it up and mails it for you. You don't have to do anything unless you're just trying to be a victim of some sort.
right. You know, unfortunately, in Summit County and some of the other counties, the people that requested ballots, there's been a huge delay in getting them.
Yes.
And simply because the person that was printing them got deluged.
Maybe we can go into that next time, but we have to sign off now, and all I can say is, God help America.
God bless
ya.
America too.
God bless America.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.